Doesn't matter where you're from, how much money you made, what your religion is, doesn't matter. If you are in an ER, if something brings you into an ER, you're going to be treated the same. I kind of miss her, I have to say. Okay, I have to scroll back a few years now. But I loved her intelligence and compassion and empathy and strength, and her courage and her dignity. You know, it was quite a life lesson in many ways to portray her for as long as I did, and the fact that she was HIV positive, really, even to this day, you know, people come up to me, whether in New York or whether I'm traveling, and they mention Jeannie Boulet in the show and the impact it had on them. And so I miss her. And sometimes, you know, sometimes people will every now and then, you know, they'll have a photograph of me as Jeannie from, you know, with the curly hair and everything. And I'm like, oh, it was so great. It had its challenges, but it was great. Up until that time, and if I'm not mistaken, and since Jeannie Boulet has been on the air, there hasn't been an HIV positive regular character on network television who, as far as I know, I mean, again, I may be mistaken, but I think that's pretty true. Definitely up until Jeannie Boulet, there wasn't an HIV positive person as an ongoing character on network on prime time. And I very much took a great deal of personal responsibility in how she was portrayed, no question about it, because, do you know, when the storyline started in 1996 was when the triple cocktails started coming out, when the medical society started to create the combination drug therapies that would literally give people who were HIV positive their lives back. So the message, the truth of the fact was HIV doesn't have to equal death anymore. Of course it still does, unfortunately, in certain situations, and too often the time, depending on, you know, access to health care and where people live in countries and politics, etc. But to this day, again, you know, Jeannie Boulet is still prevalent in people's minds, and so I knew that, and you know, we knew that we didn't want to show this person dying from the virus, and I definitely took, again, a great deal of responsibility, and I carried that weight on my shoulders, happily so, and sometimes, you know, it was very difficult to do so, but just to ensure that Jeannie would not die from HIV or from AIDS, because that didn't have to be the truth. That isn't the truth in every situation. And frankly, you know, it's my face that's out there, and I didn't want that to be the message. I didn't want that to be the story. Do you know? I would rather my face be an example via Jeannie Boulet of courage and strength and hope and life. You know, there was someone very close to me who was HIV positive. And this story of Jeannie Boulet germinated from this person's story. So how this particular person was living his life with a great deal of dignity and, again, courage and hope and no depression. You know, there were challenges, of course, and there were definitely low points. But he was the example for me on how I wanted Jeannie to be portrayed. So I gained a lot of insight from him, and very happy that that happened, do you know? Because I think that in any way possible, amidst this beautiful thing called television and the possibilities that are endless with storytelling, that without hitting somebody over the head with it, you know, without preaching about it, if one can display a certain way of being in the world, even though dealing with extremely difficult personal challenges, I think that's a good thing. You know, it's a great way to use the foundation of storytelling in television. You know, there was see, from where I stand, right? I'm an actor. Well, I'm not just an actor. I like to think of myself as many more other creative things. But part of who I am creatively is an actor. So I'm not a business person, much to the chagrin of, you know, maybe of my accountant. I wish I had more business sense oftentimes. You know, but it's a drama. You know where drama lies. And I don't know the inner workings of somebody else's mind. I don't know, you know, the details of what maybe was going on behind closed doors. I just know that, you know, we were all on the same page about how we wanted Jeannie to be portrayed. It was impossible for me to let Jeannie go at the end of the day for a couple of great reasons, in the way of, you know, the show catapulted into the stratosphere so quickly that it was impossible to go anywhere without, you know, people knowing that you're on the show. And of course, this was, you know, in an era when, which seems like, I feel like I'm 90 years old as I say this, you know, in the time when there wasn't DVR as much as, you know, where it would be a water cooler moment where people would, on Thursday nights, they would watch ER, and the whole Thursday night lineup on NBC, and then they'd talk about it Friday morning. So there was definitely a collected kind of energy around the show. And then, of course, again, because it was very much a part of my personal life that I was dealing with outside of work, that it was 24/7. And now as I look back, it was very heavy duty, you know. It was really, I definitely took it personally. And that's another thing that even to this day, I still haven't learned how not to do, which is tricky in this business because so much happens that feels like it's a personal thing, and you're not, you know, if you take it personally, then you really, it doesn't leave you in a good place. So, but I did take it personally. I took each scene personally. I took where the story was going personally. I took what people would say to me on the street personally, very much so, especially if people were HIV positive or they, you know, someone whom they loved was, or someone who just recently passed was, you know, it was a very personal thing. Again, as I look back, I think by the grace of God, I was able to, you know, be pretty strong through it. And also, as I look back, sometimes, again, if I run into a photo of that time, I feel like you can see the weight of it on my face, frankly. You know what I mean? I feel like, maybe it's good lighting today, but I feel like I look a little lighter and brighter. But again, no regrets at all, by any means. It's just I did take every single moment personally and carried it in my heart. And I think my heart got a little too full, heavy. No, I didn't try to influence, you know, with John Wells. I mean, everybody was so, and Neil, everybody, Chris Chulak, everybody was so fantastic and so smart and really, obviously, highly creative. I do remember that there would be the chalkboard kind of laid out of where the characters were going, of course. I mean, when you had that many characters and, what, 24 episodes, you had to kind of have it all written out as much as possible. And then, you know, the beauty and the intelligence and the gift of everybody who was writing and of the creators was that they would see what was happening on screen. You know, chemistry is a very palpable, almost tangible thing that you can't write about. You know, I mean, I think that when you see it on screen, when you see two people or a group of people on screen, chemistry is either there or it's not. You can't fake it. I don't think so anyway. I can automatically tell if I watch people on stage, on screen, television or film, if there's a real chemistry or not. So, you know, obviously to their great, in praise of their talent in doing so, they would see what was going on with chemistry and they would kind of adjust accordingly. My participation in activism and advocacy definitely was springboarded from my role on ER, but it didn't happen until a few years after I had left the show. It really wasn't until, okay, so so 4.5 seasons, 5 seasons later, I leave ER, and Jeannie Boulet walks out of the emergency room after having just been married and recently adopting a baby. And frankly, in a lot of ways, I felt, Gloria, felt a little bit like, okay, we did great, we did really good, and my work is done, so to speak, on this particular issue, in a way. Do you know, I felt I gave it all, I gave everything I had, and that was it. Cut to about 5 years later, in 2005, when I had read in the New York Times, on page, I don't know, way in the back, that AIDS had become the #1 killer of young black women here in the United States. And I just, you know, between the ages of 25 and 34, the #1 killer. And I thought, wait a minute, I had to reread it over a few times because we weren't talking about an African country. We were talking about, you know, right here in the United States. And I thought, why isn't anybody talking about this? Why isn't this on the front page? What is going on? You know, I thought that we handled this a long time ago with awareness, with the new medicine, with advocacy nationally, internationally, do you know, with information that's available. But there are other issues at play in certain demographics in this country. So when I started reading about that, I just couldn't, I had to do some, I mean, I had to do something. So yeah, I kind of, you know, used the platform of the show, of Jeannie Boulet, of this character, who was ahead of her time. You know, she contracted HIV. She was a heterosexual, married, professional woman. And she gets HIV from her husband, you know, almost 10 years prior to when I started reading these articles. So she was ahead of Jeannie Boulet. That whole message, that whole storyline was ahead of its time. So I picked up the, you know, not the baton, certainly, that's not even the right, but, you know, I just kind of revisited her in a way and took that message and started speaking about the issue of HIV in America, particularly in African American communities and Latino communities. And then that springboarded onto a whole other different, you know, once you start advocacy, I think, or activism, you just can't stop. It's like, you know, a really good bottle of red wine. You can't, you're just gonna have to keep on. No, it's not even a great, the comparison doesn't even, I don't even know where that came from. But no, but once I started with talking about helping to raise awareness again of the HIV pandemic here in America, I started getting involved in other issues that are close to my heart, and I've definitely focused on continuing with HIV and the global climate crisis. Very two different things, and yet very two vital, important things. Yeah, Eric. I miss him too. Yeah, Eric is, you know, Eric's a guy's guy. He's got, you know, major testosterone flowing through it. It's a beautiful thing. It really is. Yeah, it was great. I mean, it's, you know, my character was introduced halfway through the first season. All right? It's a little intimidating coming on only for what was going to be 3 episodes, and then it turned into 6, and then etc. But I have to say, Eric was great. He was very, you know, and he was obviously in the midst of this explosion of this show that is, you know, happening so quickly. And yet he really welcomed me, and it was in his cool way, you know, in that Eric LaSalle way. It's been a while since I've seen him, I have to say, and so. But yeah, it was great to, you know, I think that from, as I recall, I think our chemistry was pretty good. It was always great to be, you know, to play off of what was going on in his eyes, and the intelligence there, and, you know, and the seriousness, and also this kind of, you know, the conflict between Jeannie and him, and because of course Jeannie was married, and so anyway. Aside from what we're just talking about, the chemistry and the storyline, etc., the thing that I remember the most about first starting on the show was the fun, was the humor, especially when George was around. I mean, that would clearly, you know. It was, that's what really made it kind of really special, especially with me because, again, because the story was so serious. I was very serious. I was very serious. So I was a little scared, and so I was, but with him around, it was easy to laugh. Well, you know, George would always play practical jokes on everybody, anybody. Well, no matter if he was here in the room, no doubt something would be happening that would be funny. It's just kind of part of his nature. So, yeah, that's when I knew that, wow, this is a really unique situation here because physically, technically, we were doing something very different with the extraordinary camera work that was happening. You know, groundbreaking, people say that word a lot, but this really was groundbreaking television and how it was being shot. The stories were unbelievable, of each character, personally and professionally. And this group of actors, this whole team of actors was very unique and really strong. Everybody was really strong. So those things combined alone would set the stage for, you know, knowing that this was something very special going on. And then with the humor, you know, George and Noah they have a really great chemistry personally. You know, there was always a lot of fun going on with the two of them. Because he had been around for, you know, he'd been in the business for a long time. He's extraordinarily intelligent, creatively, and I mean all the way around. He knows about what's going on in the world. He knows about what's happening politically, here, everywhere. He's creatively, he just, you know, it's evident by the work that he's been involved with since then. And, you know, one of the things I love about him the most is that he treats everybody the same. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the whole crew loves him. Not just because he's funny, of course, because, like I said, he is, and he treats everybody with respect. And that, to me, is kind of one of the fundamental things. I have to tell you that, I know this is kind of a sidebar, but, you know, I'm single now, and if I go out on a date with someone, or when I go out on a date with someone, and say we're at a restaurant, do you know, one of the first things I look for is, how is he talking to the busboy? Do you know what I mean? Does he even acknowledge his presence? Or, do you know, it's kind of that very same type of showing respect for humanity, being intelligent about it, being extremely creative, and also knowing how to, you know, he knows the business so well, in and out, again, because he had been in it for so long. And, you know, he's relatively attractive. So I think, you know, it's not so bad. So I think that women love him. Guys want to be his friend. So that's what I love. I love that whole aspect of doing long scenes, you know, doing the oneers, and our amazing cameramen like Guy B and Dave Kamaitis. They would, you know, they're wearing this gear, the Steadicam, walking backwards throughout doorways, you know, you know, and we have how many pages to do a day? A lot. Meanwhile, everybody's on top of their game. They, you know, and this was, again, there weren't cell phones on the set. People were focused, and we would be doing our job, and maybe there were cell phones, but, you know, we all were there. We knew we wanted to do the best that we could do. So those long scenes, those long oneers, the one thing that you hoped wasn't going to happen was that you would have the last line. Because if you have the last line or the few lines, and you screw it up, then it's on you. You have to start that whole, you know, 8-minute process again. But no, I love that kind of challenge. It's kind of that was the beauty about it. You know, it elevated that creative challenge and the focus and making sure everybody was at the top of their game. I think it's like anything. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Mind you, don't ask me if I remember one medical term or really stat. Maybe that's all I can. Because the rest is gone. You memorize it, you learn, you know what it's about, you learn what it's for, and then that's it. For me anyway. Now, you know who is kind of an amazing freak about this whole thing is Noah. He can recite, I swear to God, we were on the set of Falling Skies not that long ago. He would recite whole passages of you know, a scene that he did 10 years ago. There's something wrong. I remember those lunches. I enjoyed them a lot. You know, would have the screening at lunch. Because it's helpful always to, I found it helpful to see the finished product, you know? It kind of refuels you to go back and have another 18-hour day or whatever. Do you know, it really just kind of, I always loved watching the shows. As soon as the theme music came on, I would just, really, my breath would catch a little bit. It'd just be kind of, I would feel that anticipation. It was great. I loved it. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you were in an ER?
It's been a while.
Okay. So if anybody's been in an ER, you know, you see how these doctors are. If they were to get emotional over every single person, every single patient, they'd be in the loony bin. I mean, you can't, you wouldn't be able to take it. It just would be too much on anybody. So oftentimes I've been close to being in the, you know, I'm not saying that there aren't other things going on that might propel me to, you know, but anyway, in terms of the show, no, clearly, you know, it's anybody under that amount of pressure has to have, in order to keep that job and to sustain for years, I think they have to have, you know, their essence has to be made up with an incredible amount of strength and compassion, of course, but not super sensitive. Otherwise, you just can't function by the end of the day. You just see too much to be able to carry on if everything affects you, you know, in a deep way. So that, I think, was one of the most amazing things as somebody involved in the show and as a viewer. I loved watching my fellow castmates, you know, deal with these situations that were unbelievable and highly stressful, and in a way that was, you know, for the most part equanimous. But that's not to say that there were moments, and I loved these moments also, and usually they happened, or oftentimes they happened when the character would be alone, do you know? In the locker room, or at home, or on the subway, you know, waiting for the L, where they would be quiet, and they'd have a moment, and you'd see it on their face that, my God, what just happened, you know? But in order for them to be able to make it through the day, they have to just keep going forward, moving forward. I mean, I think that that would be the case. Any emergency room doctor, cops, I mean, how do they do it? I asked to leave the show for a couple of different reasons. One of them was that I truly emotionally was burned out, I have to say. Again, because of the way I took everything so personally, and how I just was carrying around, I was just carrying it around too much for too long, and so I needed to let it go. And also I feel as though, you know, maybe JEANIE BOULET had kind of, maybe the story had run its course a little bit, and so, you know, we all agreed that that would be what would happen, would be that she would get married and walk out with a new life, starting a new life. And then I went on tour with Tina Turner. Now, people think that I left the show to go on tour with Tina, but that's not how it happened, actually. I'd asked to leave the show first. And I knew that I wanted music in my life again, because music had been first in my life creatively. And then I met Tina. So I kind of leapt, and you know, that whole leap and the net will appear kind of thing, and so I leapt. Thankfully, the net appeared. Yeah. Yes, well, Elizabeth Keckley wasn't a slave.
Right, I'm sorry.
She was, no, it's okay. She had freed herself. She was born into slavery, but she had bought her own freedom, her and her son's own freedom. And she was an entrepreneur. She was a businesswoman. She was running her own dressmaking shop in Washington, D.C., and became Mary Todd Lincoln's personal dressmaker and modiste and confidant, frankly. Yeah, working on Lincoln was, you know, it's interesting. I've been thinking about this. ER, Lincoln, both stories and both characters. Of course, Elizabeth Keckley was alive on this earth, but two women whom I've had the amazing opportunity to portray, all thanks to Steven Spielberg. You know? Yeah. Many years in between, but all thanks to him. So it's the second time in my life when I've portrayed a person whom I've taken extremely personally. I've taken, especially Elizabeth Keckley, with her story and her life, and who she was in this world, and who she was in the Lincoln household for 4 years, and who she was to Mary Todd Lincoln. I took that she walks with me. There's no question about it, 100%. Those, you know, in my acting career, those are the two most things I'm absolutely most proud of. Jeannie Boullet, of course, because of what she meant with the issue, for the issue of HIV in the world. And Elizabeth Keckley in Lincoln, no question about it. I just don't, you know, what am I going to do now? Is trying to work on that a little bit. Yikes. Neil Baer, who of course was a writer and a producer on the show for many years, very good friend of mine, amazing guy. Same birthday, Neil and I. There was this one episode he wrote where I have to do the same thing. Noah has to resuscitate a dog or something. Well, I do it to a mouse. It's just, I know I can't talk about it. It's too yeah, so, you know, well, that's a scene I could probably let go of. But the other stuff, well, you know, you try to incite a little bit of humor. So Noah's so talented. I swear. Those early seasons, those first couple of seasons, you know, and he's new, and oh my God, he's so smart. He's such a smart actor. And he would make these choices that, you know, were really, really well done, really fantastic, showing that where he was professionally and how he was just learning and kind of like a colt. You know, he's just kind of finding his legs and everything. And he's so smart. There's this young man who came up to me in a drugstore once. And this was about 1997. And I was looking at a wall of toothpaste. You know, I was trying to, you know, literally it's a wall of toothpaste, right? 350 choices of the same thing. And I'm standing there trying to decide what to buy. And this young man comes up to me, his late 20s, and he said, "Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you." And I turned to him and I said hello. And he said, "You know, I just wanted to let you know that I'm HIV positive and that I saw the show last night. And he said, and I'm going to start getting treatment today." Because of what he saw on the show. Yeah. So I don't know his name, but yeah, I remember his face. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And you know, one wonders sometimes what, you know, what the purpose is. Why are we here, really? What are we here to do? And what are we going to leave behind? You know, I've been thinking about that a lot. And so if I remember this young man, it helps to kind of maybe, you know, maybe I'm leaving something behind that really made an impact. So I hope that's the case. And all of us combined, do you know? All of us combined on ER. There were many things, there would be tons of feedback that would come back from viewers who would either be inspired to get into the profession or who learned something about a certain disease, or who gained compassion about, you know, someone afflicted with a certain physical ailment. So I think overall that this show had an ongoing impact, and it was entertaining at the same time. Yeah, so I'm very, very, very proud to have been a part of it for the length of time that I was.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit like, nah, you know, you can't think about it. Again, especially at that time when people would be watching on Thursday night and you get the numbers the next day and you think, how many people, how many living rooms was I in last night? Oh my, oh, can't think about that. I think ER was as successful as it was, and it was on the air for as long as it was, because of a number of different reasons. Because, you know, the writing was fantastic. The cast was, you know, varied and unique, and everybody brought a very specific thing. Because technically, you know, we had the best crew. We were able to do, frankly, whatever was written, they could do it. Amazing. Because it combined the difficult, intense, stressful, dramatic scenarios that happen in an emergency room subtly with what was going on personally with all of these different characters. And there was someone whom every viewer could connect to. There was always something that whomever was watching the show, they could connect to it. And it lasted as long as it did, I think, because of those reasons, you know. And as medicine changed, and as society changed, and as healthcare laws changed, and as finances changed, as did the show. It brought all of the things that make us different, you know, whether our ethnicity or our faith or finances or whatever. It brings it right back down to the fundamental human level, you know. Doesn't matter where you're from, how much money you made, what your religion is, doesn't matter. If you are in an ER, if something brings you into an ER, you're going to be treated the same. Yeah, that was, again, the humanity of it. Brought it all the way down to fundamentals. So there's the scene where Jeannie Boulet confronts Dr. Green, Anthony Edwards' character. Basically, he had his suspicions that Jeannie was HIV positive, but what he does is he looks into her file, into her medical file, which is, of course, illegal to do. And Jeannie confronts him about that. And I love that scene. It's one of the few scenes where Jeannie really kind of verbally just sets it straight. And yeah, I really like that. I remember it very clearly. You know, Anthony's such a strong, solid person and actor, of course, you know, obviously, that it was fun. You know, it's always fun to just kind of have this intellectual, moral challenge where both parties feel their viewpoint, their action is the right thing. So yeah, it was fun. I love, you know, I love that kind of stuff. Even in life, I love, oh my God, I get into conversations, yeah, you don't even want to, yeah, it's not pretty.
Exactly. Confession all of a sudden. This
True confession.
This is a whole different show. Yeah, that's...
I scared you. I saw you go, ooh.
I'm scared.
I know. There's something so intrinsically compelling about medical shows, especially about the ER. Obviously, it's life and death stuff, life and death situations. And also there's something about hospitals, about emergency rooms. You know, for those of us who've had to go into them for whatever reason, most people don't enjoy it. But yet you have no choice, basically, when you're in that situation. So there's that, you know, everybody can relate to that. And also, life is so unpredictable. None of us know when something might happen where we have to end up in a place like that. And so our curiosity, our imagination goes, well, gosh, what if that happened to me? You know, would I be taken care of in the same way? What if that happened after I was in a car accident? You know, whatever may happen, whatever the situation might be. So we're kind of drawn to that naturally, you know? And then it's just the high stress thing. We just almost people. I was always fascinated by people who worked in that environment who would watch the show, because I would think, well, why would you want to do that? And they enjoyed it. It was kind of a stress release for them to watch this show. There's something about, you know, the pressure, and then the whew, and then the end of the show, the release of the show. Yeah, it's very sexual in a way. It's like pressure, and then great. Don't
tell us more about that.
Steve had taken off his headphones.
That's right.